Oh, didn't see you there. Well, so glad you joined me. Let's have a little carburetor adventure, shall we? If we look down here at this junk we have right here, this is actually a Dellorto DRLA40 downdraft carburetor. This is one of two that are on my 2270 or 138 cubic inch big block motor. So currently this motor has my 44s on it while I am rebuilding the 40s. The 40s are more appropriate for this cubic inch. It'd be kind of like putting a 1050 double pumper on a 289. Just not something you really do. So hey, I'll kind of walk you through some of the different things on this carburetor, because these are not complicated. A typical Volkswagen DRLA or downdraft, or a Weber, another brand, would be an IDF downdraft carburetor. It's a really simple tool. And all it really does is meter fuel and air, depending on how much you step on the gas. So, I've already taken this apart and cleaned it and ran it through the ultrasonic cleaner there, and we're gonna go ahead and do some reassembly. So this top plate here holds the float. The float is something in a carburetor that controls a bowl where fuel is stored and for ready for use kind of thing. So we have a needle and seat, needle, seat, for which the float controls. So it hooks in there, real simple, just kind of sits in there. Oh, but there is one key thing you want to not forget to do, and that would be the lovely gasket, because the gasket goes on before the floats on this one. Made that mistake earlier. So you want to make sure you set that needle into the seat real gently, and then there's going to be two screws that hold this articulating arm of the floats. So I know you're wondering, well, there's something floating in the carburetor, wouldn't that go through the jets? Nope. The floats actually sit here, and they're designed to sit in gasoline all day long, and they sit and meter the amount of fuel that comes in weights in the float bowl to be used by the carburetor. Now, this is very important to make sure that they are freely articulating, because this is what actually can overflow your carburetor and fill up your cylinders with fuel. Ask me how I know. Another thing you want to make sure of is that the right distance between the float is correct. I've already measured this at 5 millimeters. Of course, you were totally concerned about that. So this actually very simply just sits inside. So we'll go ahead and lower this down on to this happy little carburetor, becoming a happy carburetor. It was a sad carburetor because it dumped an entire load of fuel down my cylinder, and I had to blow it out before it destroyed the seals inside of there. So now that we have this top piece, I'm gonna go ahead and use some of the new screws that came in my universal rebuild kit. Basically, we're just gonna have a nice little spring washer on there and get these started real gently. Everything on a carburetor needs to be just tight, snug. Not any monkey wrenching or cinching down on anything very hard. These are made of cast aluminum. They're very, very delicate. You can strip them out very easily. That's why I use the ultrasonic cleaner. Really cleans them up nicely. Want to make sure you don't miss any screws. Make sure you, when you take a carburetor apart, you go ahead and store the parts that you took out of it, so that you have an idea of how many parts are supposed to go back in. Because if you have spare parts, something's not going to work right. So we'll go ahead and just lower this down on here nice and evenly. That gasket's gonna go ahead and seal that up real nice. Now there's gonna be fuel inside that float bowl at all times. So we wanna make sure this is a really even seal. We don't want to use sealant because the gasoline will actually eat up the sealant, and the gasket that's in there is specially designed to be able to take the rigors of 100,000 miles or so of being exposed to those gasolines. Now, California has these wonderful additives called ethanol and other crap that eats away at these seals. This is why you find people with older cars and different rubber hoses and seals and whatnot find themselves rebuilding their cars a little more often than in past. So now that we have that top plate on, we can go ahead and look at some of these other things. Some of these oh, excuse me, accelerator jets and whatnot. Some of these are shaped in a specific way that only go in a certain way, and you want to make sure they go in from the top nice and easy. You don't want to force anything. These are real gentle devices that meter, fuel. You want to make sure you don't miss any gaskets like I almost just did. So we don't want these to leak. That's the whole point. We're rebuilding it, right? All right, happy little carburetor here. Again, just screw these in snug. Snug is snug. Don't need to be wrenching on it. So then we go ahead and have another nice little seal here. That's perfect. Good little seal. Make sure that needle goes all the way in there. Gotta line up the spots so it goes all the way in and sits where it's supposed to. That helps angle the needle down in where we want it. Now, idle correction valves. These have very small, and I'm not sure you can be able to see it, numbers on them. These little numbers are what indicate what size the tips are. Now, when you hear someone about jetting a carburetor has to do with figuring out the correct fuel ratios dependent upon the size of your engine and the size of your valves, whether or not your heads are poured and polished, maybe they're turbo. These are main jets here. Just this little tip piece actually is considered your main jet. This has a number on it as well. These are 170s. So these were dirty and gummed up and all kinds of craziness. So I ran them through the ultrasonic cleaner too. They have a new gasket and they just drop right in. You just nice and snug, screw them down, and that's all it takes. So when you're actually building high performance engines that use these type of carburetors, you'll have an entire row of different jets, and you'll make a pole on a rolling road, as they call it, or a dynamometer, and that will actually allow you to read how well the engine is burning the fuel. One of the key devices is actually in the tailpipe, and it's sniffing to make sure you have the correct air-fuel ratio. That is done by what's called using a wideband. Now, our fuel injection cars of today already have one of those sensors built into the exhaust. And the fuel injection computer adjusts it on the fly already while we're driving. Obviously, because this is a mechanical device from back in the day, these don't do that. So the idea is to try and build an engine that's smooth throughout the range. Now, this is the accelerator pump here. This is just a small little bellow that you want to replace. It's this guy right here. We're going to take this out and give it a nice fresh one here. Now, the reason I took these apart was because the float actually got stuck, and that's what caused it to over meter the amount of fuel going into the carburetor, and it was dumping into the cylinder. So what this does is it actually, the accelerator pump will actually give an extra little squirt when you stomp all the way down on the exhaust, on the throttle pedal there. Yeah, see how there's still a little bit of fluid in there? That's probably from the cleaning and whatnot. So we'll take the spring away real carefully. And again, because this is really soft aluminum metal, I'm not using a steel razor blade, I'm using a plastic one. So as you can see, it just comes right off nice and easy. You don't really have to push very hard. You just want a really nice smooth surface. This happy little carburetor here. Okay, but see, there's some gunk in there. We don't want that. So we'll come by with our air chuck and clean that out real nice, real quick. You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and take another swipe at this real quick. Didn't feel like it cleaned it up too well. Brake cleaner's nice because it evaporates. You don't have to worry about where it goes unless you're near a painted surface, because it will remove the paint from that surface, whatever it touches. Okay, that's nice and smooth. Excellent. Okay, so we're gonna make sure we put that spring back in the middle there, right? This goes right on top, and then the other piece is going to come around. It's kind of articulated here, so it's a little bit tricky to handle to get this spring in the right spot. But if you take your time, I'm sure you can do it. There we go. So I'm just going to apply a little bit of light pressure here. Now I'm choosing to reuse the same screws because we're trying to retain the look of the older antique carburetor. The kits usually do come with new screws if you need them. If something has a bad thread or anything like that, you definitely want to go ahead and replace those. So I'm holding tension down on here so I don't lose the seating of that spring. That is really important there. So now we're going to be able to just screw these down. Again, snug is snug. Remember, we're dealing with just aluminum here. There we go. Always do a cross pattern so we don't bind anything up. All right, that looks good. It's going together real nice. So, a couple other things with these carburetors now. I know you're asking, Bryce, how do you adjust these things? Well, one of the very first things you set is going to be the idle air mixture. That is done with these two, because these are both identical cylinders, if you will. And so we have this metering valve, essentially. So by using this needle, it goes in here and it controls the amount of air that goes in to meet the needs of the engine. Now the amount of fuel is controlled by the idle air jet. Remember that first one we put in? This guy, the little small one right there. So that controls the amount of fuel being sprayed in. Now, when you start with multiple carburetors, you're like, Bryce, how do you sync 4 cylinders together? Yeah, that is a challenge, but Dellorto has a starting point. So you screw these all the way in down to the starting point, just nice and snug, and then you back them off. And you start at that number, which I don't remember for Dellorto, so I'll have to look it up, but the number is 2 for Webers. So 2 complete turns for a Weber is your good starting point. Then you would move into setting your idle throttle stop. So once you have that set, you actually go around and adjust these one by one, and you use your ear. There's actually no device that you use. You actually just use your ear to listen to when changes to the motor occur, and you hear when it runs better or worse. This little guy right here is our main fuel input. This has a filter inside of it, believe it or not, a secondary filter. There's already one before the throttle. So here, now we have the basic carburetor together. Now, through the magic of movies, because I've already done one, I've actually completed the other side. So the other side here, with the velocity stacks and the air cleaner holder, because there would be an air cleaner, and the throttle linkage sits right here and holds on. And then you get music. All right, thanks for joining me on that nice little journey. Appreciate you guys. I love it when you stop by the shop. It's so much fun. You guys have a great night.